This video is part of a series on living and coping with worry, anxiety and depression. This is episode 4, part 2, where we will look at the depression cycle in more detail. These episodes have been created by Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust. My name is Katie Malloy and I'm an assistant psychologist for the Personality Disorder Community Service within CPFT. This episode on depression has 8 parts, and today we're going to talk about the cycle of depression, how it starts, how it maintains, and where we start to change it. So we'll just do a quick recap after last session of the cycle of depression. So depression normally starts with a trigger or a situation. This situation will lead us to having thoughts, and those thoughts can cause emotions, which has an impact on our body physically. This then will impact our behaviour. And after having certain thoughts, emotions, physical reactions, and acting in certain ways, that can lead to even more thoughts. And if these thoughts are negative, as are the emotions and everything else that comes with it, this is how we end up in a downward spiral of depression. The cycle can also travel in different directions. So for example, if we behave in an angry way, this may lead us to feeling certain emotions like feeling upset. Or say for example, we get stage fright. That impacts how our body is physically. And that can impact our thoughts, like maybe I'm not good enough to do this, or I shouldn't be doing this anyway. So what causes depression? You might ask yourself, why are you feeling this way? Because sometimes there's a really obvious reason, and sometimes there isn't, and both of those things are okay. Depression is a lot more common than many people think, and affects about 1 in 10 people at some point throughout their life. Depression isn't just feeling down for a few days, it's that long-term feeling really stuck in those negative feelings. So some of the causes for depression can be social situations, so things that are going on at home, finances and maybe a housing situation, loss of any kind, being under pressure, so maybe having caring responsibilities, and our working life. Having long-term physical health conditions can cause depression, as can things like anemia. It also could have a cause that you aren't aware of, or it could be lots of small stresses adding up together. You might find yourself wondering why you are depressed, when maybe other people seem like they're sailing through life without any issues. Or maybe things do happen to them, but they seem just to be able to cope. Our genetic makeup and our early experiences can predispose us to depression. There also may be some other reasons that aren't identifiable at this point. But I do think it's important to note that sometimes it's easy to assume other people are managing well when maybe they aren't. Many people become very focused on why they are feeling depressed and other people aren't. But sometimes it's more helpful to accept that they are feeling depressed, because to change our situation, we need to accept it first of all. It's also really common to get overwhelmed by thinking about all the changes that may have to happen in life to stop feeling the way that you're feeling. And this is another thing that can keep people focused on why it's happening to them and not somebody else. So let's go back to the depression cycle and apply an example just to make it a bit more real. Let's say the trigger in this situation is that Paul has lost his job. He may think things like, I'm useless, nobody wants to employ me after this. And those thoughts make him feel sad, depressed, and leave him with low self-worth. Maybe he's lost his confidence. These emotions and stress cause him to feel tense and give him insomnia. He's also tired a lot of the time and just wants to hide away from the world. His behaviour is then affected, so he finds himself sleeping much more in the day and not being very productive. And because he's lost his confidence and motivation, he isn't applying for jobs. These behaviours just reinforce those thoughts of being useless and nobody wanting to employ him, as Paul can see that his life hasn't actually had much purpose since he lost his job, which makes him feel even more useless. His sleep cycle may worsen at this time as the cycle goes round and round, which might make him more vulnerable to his emotions. Or maybe if he was offered a job out of the blue, he may not go for it as he's feeling so low. This scenario might apply to many people during the COVID-19 pandemic, so it's really easy to see why many people may have felt depressed at this point in time. So now we're going to think about how this cycle applies to you. Breaking down complex emotions such as depression is really key in understanding them and being able to tackle them in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. The cycle also works for other things such as anxiety. So starting with the trigger or situation. This can be something simple as a thought that popped into your head, or a more obvious event like losing someone close to you. Be as specific as you can here. It's easier to change downward spirals from occurring if we know exactly what thoughts, feelings, and situations we're working with. Next, what thoughts automatically came about? This could be about yourself or the event, and it doesn't matter if they aren't rational right now. Now, think about the emotions that this caused. Again, being specific is key here. So sometimes anger is just anger, but other times anger can mask emotions such as embarrassment. Next, you want to think about how your body responded. So really try to tune into what was happening in your body. This can be really tricky for some people because these physical reactions can happen so quickly or be so small that we don't even notice them. So think about things like, were your palms sweaty? Do you feel tension somewhere? Did you have butterflies in your stomach? If you're struggling with this, try to go through each body part one by one and see if you can come up with how that body part was feeling at that time. And lastly, we want to think about the behaviours that happened. So how did you end up acting after this situation? Again, be specific, but also try to be objective. Once you've filled out all these boxes, start to think about how they interact with each other. So does your cycle always travel in the same direction? What happens for you when the cycle goes round a number of times? Maybe new things start to appear in the cycle, maybe even new triggers. And where would your cycle be easiest to break? If you're struggling to start at the beginning, try to fill in what you can to see if it comes to you later on. If you find yourself always getting stuck on a certain element, this can be a really good clue on where tapping into might help. You can always choose a different scenario instead. It can be a really natural response for some people to feel suicidal if they've been depressed for a long time. If you feel like you need urgent support or you feel like you can't keep yourself safe, please contact one of the following. The first option is 111 option 2, and this is in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough only. This will put you through to the first response team. You can also contact your GP or their out-of-hours service, your mental health team if you have one, or you can go to A&E if it's an emergency. Samaritans is also a free service. They're contactable 24 hours a day, every day of the year, and you can call them for free, anonymously, on 116 123, and they are a listening service. It's important that if you are feeling this way, to get the support you need, and it is out there to help you. That's it for part 2. On part 3, we're going to talk about behavioural activation. So thinking about the depression cycle that we've spoken about today, behavioural activation means thinking about the behaviours that we can put in place to change how that cycle continues, or if it continues at all. It's really key that we change our behaviour in the depression cycle, because changing thoughts and emotions and our physical reactions are very difficult to start with. All we need in the depression cycle is to break one element of that chain, and breaking just one element of that cycle can really transform how we feel. So I really encourage you to listen to the next video as well. Part 4 is going to look at values and activities. So what activities we're taking part in that essentially give our lives meaning, and thinking about how these activities fit in with our own values. This brings us to the end of our video. Thanks for watching, and I hope it's been helpful in understanding the cycle of depression, how it starts and how it maintains. The next episode will go into more detail about how to break this cycle. And thank you again for watching.